Love, love, love. We know all about love, don't we? I think we're kind of confused, actually, because I can say to my daughter, Jennifer, I love you. Do you know I love you? And then, why don't we go to La Fuente? I just love that enchilada plate. So I love my wife, and I love tacos. I mean, is there something odd about that? I think probably so. How do we learn about love? I don't know about you, but I didn't really learn about it growing up. My parents were raised in the Depression, and so they were all about making sure we didn't waste anything. And my dad used to say, "Son, you got a bug about relationships." What is that? I don't know. I can remember thinking, well, what's something wrong with that? I mean, aren't relationships good? But they were about maintaining the basics of a family because they weren't raised with that. And one time I was complaining to my mom about something. I know you can't believe that, but I was complaining to my mom, and she said, "Son, you have a roof over your head, shoes on your feet, and 3 meals a day. What more do you want?" I remember being in college in a class on mental health, thinking, wow, these are some new and diverse and interesting thoughts. Somewhere along the way, hopefully we will learn about love, because most of what we call love is broken people hoping that the other person will somehow make them whole. And so we've allowed our ideas about love to be formed and shaped by dysfunction instead of allowing the concept of love to teach us what it really is about. I think we have some bad ideas about love. Do you have any ideas in your head that are wrong? Well, of course not. If I knew what they were, I'd get rid of them, right? Right? Nobody thinks what they think is wrong. Otherwise, we wouldn't think that. We'd think something else. But there are lots of ideas in our brain that probably need to go away because we just see the world in such a small way. I found a story the other day. I wasn't even looking for it, and I thought, oh, how delightful. It'll fit in the sermon. It's about a guy who's talking to a baby in the womb. And he says, oh my gosh, you got a big surprise coming. There's a new world out there, and it is nothing like what you've experienced. You're going to have so many things happen to you, you just can't believe it. And the baby said, what? What are you talking about? This is the only world. This is the world. Yeah. Sometimes that's how we are. We get used to seeing things a certain way, living a certain way, doing a certain way, thinking a certain way, and we don't realize maybe there is another way. I would self-disclose to you today that Kathy and myself, this is my second marriage. And in my first marriage, I made the mistake of what a lot of people do, which is expecting that other person to make me happy. Doesn't work. In fact, the problem in our world with divorce isn't divorce. The problem is we get married for crazy reasons. We get married for all kinds of broken reasons, and then we wonder years later why a thing doesn't work. I expected her to make me happy. That's completely unfair. I don't know where I learned this, but somewhere along the way, by the time Kathy and I got married, I began to believe that this relationship was going to work a lot better if I invested in her. If I made our relationship not about me taking, but about me giving. So we've always had rules. The first rule was, hey, we got these little kids. If you want to work, fine. If you don't want to work, that's fine too. We'll just live on whatever Jeff makes. It's fine. We had a rule about college. She hadn't finished college. You want to go back? Great. You don't want to go back? No problem. A few years ago, she went back and finished college. And it was a very exciting time for our family. And then we had this other rule about church things too, like I'm not going to force her to do anything she doesn't want to do, as if I could do that anyway, right? But people would come up to me and they would say, will your wife teach Sunday school? I don't know. Ask my wife. They go ask my wife to come in. She said no. Well, so that a relationship becomes not simply when mama's happy, everybody's happy. I'm talking about something different than that. I'm talking about learning to set aside some of ourselves to invest in another person. Well, before we can understand what that's like, we need to get rid of some of our false ideas about love. One of the words that's commonly associated with love is the word attraction. I find you so attractive. Oh, isn't that a beautiful person? Oh my goodness, it's love at first sight. Now, how could that be unless you could see the soul of a person? You know, if you could really see someone's soul, and maybe we can, maybe I would understand more love at first sight. But if love is attraction, if love is, oh, isn't that person beautiful? What happens when they're in a car wreck and they get scarred on their face? Or what happens when they get in an industrial accident at work and they get their ear chopped off? What happens if they get old and their hair falls out? I mean, what happens then? She's going to look at me and go, I don't find you so attractive anymore, right? And it's just, it all evaporates. And we've all known beautiful people that inside were ugly. Oh. And after a while, you stop thinking about them as beautiful, don't you? And we've also known people that weren't really blessed with God's good looks, and we meet them and think, oh, poor thing. That's terrible. And then what happens? You get to know them, and you see inside of them, and they're beautiful, and you love them. And after a while, you don't think of them as looking different. You think of them as wonderful and awesome. So love has to be more than attraction. Love is also more than dependence. Think of two dominoes holding each other up, two broken people just hoping that the other will make them happy. Listen, I'm broken, I can't pay my bills, and I know you're broken, you can't pay your bills. Maybe if we got married, we could make a go of it. Does that sound crazy? I mean, you'd be surprised. I have this giant emotional hole inside of me, and I know you've got to have one too. Maybe if we get together, then we could sort of become one whole, your half and we could sort of be one whole person. That's why they say that the best marriages are two people that come together that are healthy and whole by themselves ahead of time. The real problem with this notion of dependence is I'm taking from you constantly. I mean, the whole relationship is about me taking from you. And what do the scriptures say? Love is not self-seeking. Love doesn't mean I need something from you, give it to me. Another word that comes up with love is desire. And certainly there should be some desire, some sense of joy and wanting to see that person. I look forward to seeing my wife every time that I can. But again, desire is about what I want. And any relationships that are marked by what I want never turn out very good. In fact, the whole notion of the Christian faith, isn't it the struggle between the spirit and the flesh? Between taking to ourselves or learning to release things? I would say to you today that love is more about letting go of things and pouring yourself into another than it is taking to ourselves. So let's talk for a minute about sermons. I often get in trouble in sermons, not for what I say, but for what I don't say. Imagine that. So here's this topic, and it's 22 minutes that's supposed to answer every question in the world comprehensively about the subject. But you just can't get it all, can you? There's always something that you can't reach. And so maybe I'm giving a sermon on fidelity and marriage, and stick with it. Work harder. Don't give up this week. There's always next week. Stay with it. Go to a counselor, And what happens after the sermon? Somebody comes up and says, I'm in an abusive relationship. How could you dare say that to me? And I go, no, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about this. So today I want to talk about this, but there's a little of that. Some people become doormats, okay? I'm not talking about that today. I'm not suggesting that all of you become doormats to prove your love to someone. Most of us, I don't think that's our problem. okay? But that's the part I'm not talking about today. What I am talking about instead is what I think is more largely the truth, is that in this life, we by nature are takers, and we take to ourselves, and we gather to ourselves, and we want more and more, and we expect more and more from people, and we're unhappy because somebody didn't do what I needed them to do, and the world didn't align itself with my desires. And so there's a need for us to learn that some of the ways that we want things to go aren't necessarily the most important parts of life. And so let's bounce back to this scripture where Paul is writing about spiritual gifts. Oh, how exciting! Apostles and prophets and teachers and workers of miracles and healers and those that give direction and all these things that are going on in the church. And they're all just full of themselves, right? When I first learned about the scripture in college, they were teaching us that this is proof that spiritual gifts are really important. What I would say to you is that that isn't what Paul is saying at all. Paul is actually doing the opposite. He's saying, oh, you do this, oh, you do that, oh, you do another thing. Hold on. Let me show you the most important way. Let me show you the best gift. Because if I speak in tongues or work miracles or have gifts of help but have not love, I'm nothing. Paul is saying you may be the greatest Sunday school teacher in the church, but if you have not love, you're missing the boat. You may be the hardest worker at every workday, but if you have not love, you may be the best singer in the choir. You may be the best giver in the church, but if you have not love, we're missing it entirely. And so sometimes we have to look away from how we want things to go and let go to find what love really means. Take your children. Did they grow up? Mine grew up. And I look at them and I think, you want to move to Chicago? You can't move to Chicago. Why? Hell, why do you want to move to Chicago? What's wrong with you? You want to move to Chicago? Hey, it's Father's Day. You didn't call me. Hey, I didn't hear from you. Hey, what's going on with this? Well, I'm only doing this because I love them. Don't you understand? I just want what's best for you. Why would you take a job like that? And that person you're dating, really? You need to listen to me. I'm trying to help you. Why? Because I love you. That's what we say, but does it feel like love? We end up driving our kids away. We have to learn that we don't always get a choice. We don't always get a say. We have a little joke at our house about Thanksgiving that one day we'll send a note to all the kids and say, don't know what your plans are. If you want to come to the house for Thanksgiving, there's a turkey in the fridge. You know, we'll leave $50 on the counter and get whatever else you need. Your mom and dad are going to be in the Bahamas. There's a story that is not a very good story, but someone once told me after they heard this story that it changed their life because it caused them to think about some of the things in their world that they had insisted be a certain way. So here's how it goes. A young girl, a teenage girl in a village becomes pregnant, and she tries to hide it from her parents. But after, can't hide that forever. And after a while, the parents are going, "What is up? What is up?" And she's embarrassed, and so she says, "Mom, Dad, on the outskirts of town, that monk that lives in that hut, it was him." And the parents are furious. They are furious that a holy man would take advantage of a teenage girl. And they tell everyone in town, and when the baby is born, they all go stomping out there, and they knock on his door, and they say, "What kind of a person are you? You're a horrible man. You did this to this girl. You crushed her. You hurt her. You broke her. You've ruined the story of her life. And this child that you've sired, here, take it. Raise it yourself." And being a holy man, he said, very well, very well. Took the child, and everybody went home. Well, a few weeks go by, a few months go by, and as all mothers do, the teenage girl begins to pine for the baby. and it just gets so much to where she has to go and talk to her parents. And she says, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry I lied to you. I lied to you. The father of the baby is Johnny. And the parents go, oh my gosh, what have we done? What have we done? And so they gathered the people in the village and they told them the truth. And the whole village went back out to the house, to the hut of the monk. And they knocked on his door and he came to the door. And they said, Sir, we're so sorry. We know you're a holy man. We didn't know. The words that we said were so painful and terrible and hurtful to you. We're so very sorry. But please, can we have our grandchild back? And as the story goes, the monk gives back the child and says, very well, very well. There are some things in life that we get all excited about that we shouldn't. We need to stop. Now, there are some things that are always going to be right and wrong. ISIS is always going to be wrong, okay? But I have been thinking for a few years about the phrase, love keeps no record of wrongs. You maybe have heard me talk about that, and you certainly have heard me talk about this chapter, this 1 Corinthians chapter. Part of the reason I've been stuck there, maybe I'll be able to move on now, is because I've been thinking about love keeps no record of wrongs. And up until a few weeks ago, what I was thinking about love keeps no record of wrongs was I'm going to forgive the people that hurt me. So here's Stan. Stan said something that hurt my feelings. Well, since I'm not going to keep a record of wrongs, I'm going to forgive Stan now. And here's Carol. She ran over my cat, and she keeps doing it on purpose. And so I'm going to release Carol. I'm going to forgive her. And so I forgive all of you for anything that you've done to me. And that's what my brain was thinking regarding love keeps no record of wrongs. Does that seem pretty reasonable to sort of think about it in that way? I think it does. But I had another thought a few weeks ago, and it goes like this. Love keeps no record of wrongs doesn't mean you did me wrong and I know it, but I'm going to release you from it. Love keeps no record of wrongs means I'm not even keeping a list anymore. I'm not keeping a record of the wrong things that someone did. I'm not wasting my time being negative. I'm not wasting my time being unhappy. I'm not even going to keep a list. Gosh, think of all the things that could fall off our list. Someone was rude to me. It happens. Someone pulled in front of me. Someone did something. Someone made me mad. Someone robbed me. Love keeps no record of wrongs means I'm getting everything off of my list I possibly can, and I'm allowing you to be human. I'm going to start spending a lot less time releasing people from what they did because I'm not going to care about some of those things as much as I have in the past. In the English language, we have one word for love. In Greek, there are three. You guys know this. Phileo, like the city of Philadelphia, means brotherly love. Eros, which means erotic love. And agape, which is God's love, this selfless kind of love, this sense of losing yourself in another person. I want to tell you a story because I just saw what I thought was such a wonderful example of this. A few weeks ago, we had a wedding, and I need Fred, can I borrow you for a few minutes? I promise not to embarrass you. You're going to be the groom. Just stand right here. This wedding was over in the chapel, so it's a smaller venue. And stand right here. Turn around and face them. Great. See the end of these pews? You want that right on the middle of you, okay? That just keeps you right for the pictures. Okay. So this is a couple. They are 50 years old, and they are abiding by the rule that the groom doesn't get to see the bride the day of the wedding, okay, which is fine. And so the groom lives in Tennessee. I've never met the guy till the day of the wedding, and he comes in, and I meet him, and we have a talk, and I'm lining him out, and I take him in the chapel before it starts, and I say, okay, we're going to come in the side door. No, you're fine. Just stay right here, and you're going to stand here, and your best man will stand here next to you. And you'll see your bride at the back with her dad. And keep your eyes on her as she comes in. But when the dad gets down here with your bride, turn and face the front. Go ahead. Yeah, that front. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And then there'll be like a paragraph or so. And then I'll say, who gives this woman to be married? And he said, her mother and I. And then you slide over, and she'll take your arm, and she's yours. Okay, great. All right. Well, so let's go back to over here. Turn around. You're going to make the sermon go long. So this was so beautiful. They're in their 50s. He hasn't seen her all day. And here comes the best woman down the aisle, and she stands over here. And then here's the bride and her dad. When the groom sees her, he starts to cry and shake. And all the way down, she comes down the aisle, just weeping and shaking. And when the father of the bride and the bride gets down there, and I'm going to let you be the father of the bride now. Great. Okay, hold still. He starts to do this. He starts to push on the dad. And he says, can I just take her now? Thank you. And I had to say, let the dad give her away, then she's all yours. But what a wonderful picture of being totally lost in another person. A lot of times we don't see this, we don't find this in a relationship because we're still so stuck on what's coming to me. The reason we're stuck on what's coming to me is we're all so broken. We feel so unloved. Over and over and over in the scriptures, Old and New Testament, we have this phrase, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. What do we hear? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor. Most of us have no idea what it means as a Christian to love yourself, because the world has taught us we love ourselves by taking. God has another idea of what it means to look in the mirror and say, I can relax about life because I'm loved by God. The very message of Jesus coming to earth is a sign to all of us that we are loved by God. There is a famous fairy tale, and fairy tales are written for adults, right? They're written for children, we think, but they're really adult stories. That's why we resonate with them. And so there's a story of the princess who is out for a walk and finds a frog in the forest. And the frog says, Rudy, I'm really a prince. Take me home. Keep me on your nightstand a couple of nights. Kiss me on the third day. I'll turn into a prince. So she takes the frog back and all around the palace, and people are going, oh, disgusting. Get that thing, slimy thing, out of here. You're a princess. Why do you have that thing with you? Get rid of that thing. You're going to get warts. But she saw the good. She saw the value. And she kept the frog. And on the third day, she kissed it. And it turned into a prince. And they lived happily ever after. What I always thought that story meant growing up was something about true love. Isn't love great? Isn't love nice? Love's great. The end. But there's another way to look at that story, and that is this. In this life, all of us at one time or another have felt like a frog. Because somebody told you you weren't good enough. Somebody told you you weren't wanted. Somebody treated you like you were a frog. Someone said you were ugly. You were not wanted. On and on and on it goes. God sends Jesus. He finds us in the forest. And he doesn't care what other people are saying. He picks us up. He embraces us. He kisses us. And we are healed. And friends, when you understand the lengths that God went through to tell you that you are worth it, that you are okay, that you are valuable, that you are forgiven, life is no longer about me collecting more things. And I can begin to think about what it means to give myself away. And so we get to participate in this story where life is no longer about me getting more and having more and collecting the emotional things that I need from you. But now I get to participate in the story too. I do, you do, all of us do, out in the forest looking for the frogs, looking for the broken, looking for the people whose lives are filled with heartache, and picking them up and taking them home and hugging on them and telling them, God loves you very much. This is the great privilege that we are called to as believers, not simply to believe some things in our head, but to be so filled with his love and grace that we go out and share that every day. If there are ideas in your head that aren't good ideas about love, friends, let them go. Let them go. Life is too short to be a collector of other broken people, and God's gift to us is to know that we are loved. Let's pray.